Hello everyone, this is Abhishek Jain. You are watching Law Curators, and today we are up to something new. Since the very inception of this channel, we have been providing you with videos on some very important aspects of law by Mr. S.P. Jain Advocate. But today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Vinay Kumar Garg, who is a senior advocate practicing in the Honorable Supreme Court of India. He was kind enough to make some time and elucidate and enlighten us about today's topic of discussion, that is the power of government to direct payment of wages and suspend the rights of recovery of rent. We are sincerely thankful to Mr. Vinegar for this kind gesture. Now, coming back to today's topic, uh, as we all know that the world is at war with COVID-19 and governments all around the world are imposing stricter measures, new orders and restrictions on their citizens. India, not being untouched by this virus, have followed similar suit, and several new directives and orders have been implemented by the government. Today we will be discussing about two such directions, that is in respect of the directions given to the industry owners, the shop owners or the factory owners to make the payment of their daily wage workers or their employees. And the second topic of discussion will be the order passed by the government to the landlords or the property owners to suspend the recovery of rent from their tenants. I hope today's session will be enlightening for all of us and we'll be able to get some important points out of it. I thank Mr. Vinay Garg once again for taking this time out. Meanwhile, you all are requested to ask all your questions regarding the topic in the comment section below, and we'll try to accommodate as many questions as possible after the session ends. So thank you once again, and now over to you, sir.
Thank you, Abhishek. Hello, viewers. Very good evening. And as all of you are aware, we are experiencing an unprecedented situation now, wherein the entire world is suffering from a pandemic, worst kind of a pandemic ever, wherein more than, if you go by today's figures, more than 32 lakhs world over are affected, and more than 2 lakhs of the population is wiped off because of this virus alone. In India also, as many as 33,000, more than 33,000 people are affected, and we have lost lives of more than 1,000 of our citizens. Now, the persons of my age, less than my age, or even more than my age, have never seen such situation, and this has called for unprecedented actions by the government, namely the locking down the entire country. Everybody for last more than a month has been patiently locked down in their houses. People are following. People are following the directions by the government, and people also are following and maintaining the all the advisories which are being issued from time to time. Now, as a lawyer, we see two specific directions which are issued by the government in during these periods. I'll tell you the specifics of it. One was with regard to payment of workers, payment of wages to the workers by the industries, shops, establishments. And second was with regard to directions to the landowners not to recover, not to claim rentals for their properties for this lockdown period. Now, this, to my mind, gave rise to serious legal issues, And of course, the issue will be as to whether the government actually has such power, and if yes, then under which statute, which is that statute or the constitutional power which empowers the government to make any such direction, which are in the nature of a direction. Once prima facie, one may say that these are the directions which are one sided for the benefit of one class, namely the workers, and putting an undue obligation on the other class, namely the employers and the landlords, in spite of the fact that both of them are under lockdown. So now going back on this, if we see that the initially in India we did not have any constitutional or the statutory framework to empower the government to take such measures. The approach all throughout had been of relief and rehabilitation, that is post any disaster situation. But now this is the time when the government has taken an action that is not post the disaster situation but pre-disaster situation and during the disaster situation. If I may take you historically, when the we became independent, we had only one act called the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, which was enacted by the then colonial government post bubonic plague in the state of Bombay at that time. And in that act, which is just a four sections act till it was recently amended the by Indian government now, this act empowered the state to take measures, as also the uh, central government take certain measures. Now, if you see the provisions of this act, then this act empowered the state not only to take measures but also to determine in what manner and by whom any expense incurred, including compensation, if any, shall be defrayed. No such power, on the contrary, was given to the central government under Section 2A. Nonetheless, this act also did not deal with either the payment of wages or deal with this kind of a situation wherein even the rentals which are to be paid under the realm of private contract, that has been stopped by the government. Recovery of rentals have been stopped by the government. Now, apart from this, apart from the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, we had been dealing with the situation as regards payment of compensation or providing relief by the constitutional provisions, by interpretation of the guarantee of under Article 21, that is right to life. Supreme Court in various decisions interpreted Article 21 of the Constitution of India, read with Article 38, 43, 47, that is the articles dealing with the directive principles of the state policy, and had interpreted it in a manner so as to provide and state that yes, Article 21 also includes the right to ask for compensation and also empowers the state to give compensation to those affected by any epidemic, natural calamity, any disaster, or some situation of the life. Now, many of our viewers are aware that this kind of a this interpretation of this by the Supreme Court was in can be traced in various judgments of the Supreme Court. I'll give you the reference of two. One is Neerja Chaudhary versus the State of MP, that is 1984, Volume 3, Supreme Court cases, page 243. And the one more judgment, that is N.D. Jayal and others versus Union of India, that is 2004, Volume 9, SCC, page 362. Now, in these two judgments, the Supreme Court had said that the right to get compensation emanates from Article 21, and state being the custodian of the fundamental rights, state being in a while implying the parent patrie doctrine against the sovereign, the Supreme Court had held that a state in such situations is liable to compensate and to rehabilitate and give relief to its citizen affected by any such calamity, disaster, and anything wherein the state or its instrumentality otherwise may or may not have any role. So it was because of this that while exercising jurisdiction by the Supreme Court in under 32, Supreme Court has taken a view that even in case of hunger, in case of famine, in case of severe accidents, this, that, in variety of situations wherein the state or any of its officers or instrumentalities were not involved, but it was either a natural disaster or something of the like, but still a state was held liable to compensate and give relief to the citizen, to rehabilitate them and to redress their miseries, so that they can exercise and they can they could fulfill their right to life under Article 21 to the maximum. Now, this problem of lack of statutory framework except the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 was felt, and it was felt not only in India, but it was felt world over. And the United Nations General Assembly in 1990 designated the that decade as the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction. Now that was the turning point, and thereafter the objective of the United Nations General Assembly, while declaring that decade, was to decrease loss of life, property, social and economical destruction due to natural or man-made disasters. Thereafter, the United Nations adopted International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, that is ISDR, and in 2002, a World Summit was held on sustainable development, which essentially dealt with this issue also, namely to deal with disaster and disaster situations. In India, if you all remember that in the year 2001-2002, a committee was constituted, committee headed by very eminent Chief Justice of India, the retired Chief Justice of India, my Lord Justice M.N. Venkatachalya, a very learned jurist. His committee was constituted to revisit the working of the Indian Constitution and suggest what more need to be added and what more need to be, what kind of a shape we should give it so as to address the current scenario, current situation, and current demands of the citizen. That committee submitted its report incidentally on 31st of March 2002. We are now here in March and April only. And that committee took note of a suggestion which came to it from the agriculture ministry at that stage, that a new entry be added to schedule 3, that is to schedule 7, list 3, that is the concurrent list in the constitution. An entry need to be added, and that entry to say management of disaster and emergencies, natural or man-made. Justice Venkatachalaya's committee, after considering the entire issues before it, actually made a recommendation that yes, there is need, because none of the entries in all the 3 lists, the then existing list, namely the union list, the state list, or the concurrent list, is specifically dealt with the management of disaster and emergencies. Now, that is a matter of history, that this kind of this amendment could not be brought in, and this entry was never included in the concurrent list as suggested by the committee. But post this report and post all this what is going on in the world, there was we experienced the 2004 tsunami. Not only we, several nations in the Asia, they experienced, and they which brought in many devastations, loss of life, extensive loss of properties, and it was at that time, post this tsunami disaster, that India came up with, the Indian Parliament came up with the present legislation, namely the Disaster Management Act 2005. Now it was this act which for the first time not only dealt with what is to be done post a disaster, namely for relief and rehabilitation for all those who are affected by the disaster, but also dealt with those stages, namely when we, with our technological advancements now, are aware that this disaster is coming, like the present, that we knew that at least 2-3 months before that this disaster is coming, and its magnitude may be higher or its magnitude may be lesser. So similarly, we now have technological know-how available to some kind of forecast to some extent floods, to forecast to some extent earthquakes and other disasters, natural disasters. And there are, situations which, so we, by this act, for the first time, the disaster was linked with the development issue. And it was for the first time felt that, yes, we must have a statutory and legal framework to not only prevent, if possible, disaster, make preventive arrangement like shifting of people, this, that, making suitable arrangements, making preparatory arrangements in hospitals, making arrangements for food, shelter, and all these kind of arrangements. What should be the response of the states and the authorities at the time of disaster, and of course, relief and rehabilitation work during and post disaster. Now, this act, as all of us know, now provide for a national disaster management authority. It talks of state disaster management authorities, then executive committees, state executive committees, and even executive committees at the district level also, so that at each level of the government, there are systems and things in place which can act swiftly at the time of disaster, and which can, so that the people will not have to wait for days, and relief and the necessary know-how, necessary material, this, that, everything reaches to them well within the time when it is most required. Now, I'll talk about the various provisions, what this act makes and what this act provides and what this does not, a little later. But in today's discussion, we are essentially dealing with two orders passed by the central government. Initially, an order of 20th of March 2020 was issued by the Ministry of Labour, whereby the Ministry of Labour had issued a letter to all the chief secretary and the concerned secretaries of the states and the UTs, advising them that the industry should be advised to pay wages to its workmen during the lockdown period. Then this was followed by another uh, letter of the order of the government, that is the central, by the Ministry of Home Affairs, on 29th of March, where once again, though the language used initially was advisory, 29th of March letter. Initially it was advisory, but the this specifically provided for two things. One, that all employees, be it in the industry or shops and commercial establishments, shall make payment wages to the work at their workplace on due date. That was one with regard to payment of wages. Now, the second direction which this order made was that wherever workers, including the migrants, are living in rented accommodation, landlords of those properties shall not demand payment of rent for a period of 1 month. Now, these are two directions which have given rise to various claims and various disputes. And as you must be aware that several petitions challenging this particular direction about payment of wages as also payment of rental have come up before on the Supreme Court of India, and Supreme Court of India has issued notice in those petitions asking the central government to show and justify as to how and under which power they have issued these directions. Now, in our today's discussion, let me first take up the issue with regard to the direction by the central government to the landlords not to charge rent for the period of 1 month. Now, as I just now read to you, this order reads that wherever workers, including migrants, are living in rented accommodation. The landlords of those properties shall not demand payment of rent for a period of 1 month. This order has purportedly been issued under in exercise of power under section 10 subsection 2 subclause L. Now, if you see this direction, firstly, this direction is as vague as it could be with regard to the class of people to whom it shall be applicable, namely the workers, including migrant. And secondly, it does not take into consideration as to what is the real rationale to say that you will not claim rentals, you will not demand payment of rentals. That, to my mind, is actually a deferment only for a period of only 1 month. One may argue that the government might have thought that this lockdown will continue only for a period of 1 month. So that may be a justifiable reason to say that initially it was for 1 month and we may come out, or the government may, God knows, tomorrow come out with this with an amendment saying that it will be for the entire lockdown period. That apart. But if we see the provisions of law as they now exist, there is no such power either in the state government or in the central government to say that the landlords will not demand rent. On the contrary, an agreement, an agreement of tenancy, which is essentially is a lease under Transfer of Property Act, it lies in the realm of private contract, wherein one party, namely the landlord, has offered its premises for residential, commercial, or other use, and the other party, namely the tenant, has accepted that offer, and parties have entered into an agreement of which rent is the consideration. Now, if we look at section 108 of the Transfer of Property Act, section 108 of the Transfer of Property Act clearly prescribes that it is the obligation of the tenant to pay rent. Apart from contractual obligation, this statutory mandate under section 108 of the Transfer of Property Act is there, which provides that it does not lie in the mouth of any tenant to say that, look here, my landlord never asked for payment of rent, so I did not pay the rent. On the contrary, law puts an obligation upon the tenant to pay rent, because that being the consideration for the contract between a landlord and the tenant, the contract, it is the essential condition of the contract that so long as the tenant pays rent, the landlord will allow him to use and occupy his premises. Now, we in India have rent control legislations also, which is a social welfare legislation, is in the category of a social welfare legislation, wherein certain kind of tenancies are protected. So, even if a contractual tenancy is terminated by one party, namely the landlord, the tenant gets protection against the statute, namely the Rent Acts, and there the tenant cannot be evicted. Landlord cannot seek eviction except on the grounds which are prescribed in that particular statute. But all these statutes in all the states, every state has their own rent control act. Delhi has Delhi Rent Control Act. UP has its own. Madhya Pradesh has its own. So all states in India, they have their own rent control acts. But there's a common thread in all these rent control acts, namely that non-payment of rent is a ground for eviction. And the tenant cannot say that the landlord never demanded, so I did not pay. And when the tenant may or may not have been given an opportunity to make the payment of arrears, like in Delhi, the Rent Act provides that tenant will have to be given, in case of a default in payment, tenant will be given an opportunity. But if yes, once availed an opportunity, the tenant once again defaults, then he is liable for eviction. So the scheme of the law has been in India. It is in consonance with section 108 of the Transfer of Property Act, namely that so long as the tenant is in the tenanted premises, so long as the tenant claims himself to be a tenant, he is liable to pay rent. And no tenant can say that, look here, I am not liable to pay rent, but still I am entitled to occupy the premises. Now the question is whether the government, here the tenants are not saying that we are not liable to pay rent, but can the government, as it has done now in this order of 29th March 2020, can the government say that landlord's right under the statute will not be exercisable for a period of 1 month? If yes, if there is any statutory mandate empowering the government to issue such direction, that yes, the landlord's right will be eclipsed to that extent. But otherwise, if it is not, then this power of the government will remain only an advisory at best and cannot be exercised in a court of law. If you just, in the Disaster Management Act, there are two provisions. That is, one is section 6, which specifies the powers and functions of the national authority. And the other is section 10, which specifies the powers and functions of the National Executive Committee. Similar are the provisions for State Executive Committee and the District Executive Committee. Now, since this order of 29th March has been issued under this section 10, if reading of section 10 does not show at all as to where it provides and it empowers the National Executive Committee, and incidentally the Secretary Home has been designated as the authority of the National Executive Committee, and in that exercise, by virtue of that designation, he has issued this direction. Now, this subclause L of section 2 of subsection 2 of section 10 says that National Executive Authority lay down guidelines for or give directions to the concerned ministries or departments of the Government of India, the state government and the state authorities regarding measures to be taken by them in response to any threatening disaster situation or a disaster. Now, reading this language as it exists, in spite of the wide amplitude of the language and in spite of the widest possible terminology is used in the provision, it nowhere even suggests or empowers the government to override or impinge upon the rights of the landlords either under the contract or under a statute, right, whether it is a rent control act or under the transfer of property act. So to my mind, this direction is without any authorization, and even the disaster management act does not empower the central government to issue any such direction or advisory. Secondly, this direction by itself creates a class amongst the class, namely the tenants who are beneficiaries of this direction, including the migrants. So this classification of tenants who have to be either the workers or the migrants, this classification is an arbitrary classification without any reasonable nexus, without any differential as to how and on what basis it is determined that one class of tenants need protection or this kind of a direction, whereas the other class of tenants who also are tenants, who also are locked down, who also have their sources dried up, who also have their jobs, their shops, everything closed down, they do not need any such protection. So this, by very language used in the order, its classes within the class of general class of tenants as a whole, and at the same time is in the realm of complete arbitrariness to the extent that it does not take into consideration the rights of the landlords to recover rent during the period. Now, to my mind, this direction, assuming that the state has acting as a welfare state, as is the constitutional mandate, has social obligation to protect those who are weak, those who are distressed, in need. But if there is any such obligation, then can that obligation be shifted, is obligation of the state, be shifted to the citizen, individual citizens? And yes, are the individual citizens bound by any such social obligation of the state? That is something which I will deal with when we talk about the second issue, namely payment of wages. So I'll conclude this particular topic, namely with regard to the direction to the landlords not to demand payment of rent for a period of 1 month as a direction which is without any authority of law, and apart from that, it is also violative of Article 14 of the Constitution of India and is per se arbitrary. Now coming back to the other direction, namely the direction to the employers, be it in industry or in shops and commercial establishments, to make payment of wages to their workers. Now, if we look at this direction. Firstly, the direction was issued on 20th of March 2020 by the Ministry of Labour, which was in the nature of an advisory instead of being an order. And then came the order of 29th of March, wherein this direction has been made by the central government. Once again, this direction has given rise to several questions. First, of course, that this direction has been issued by the central government claiming that it has power under section 10(2) clause L of the Disaster Management Act, whereas the act does not confer any such power on the central government and does not deal with the provisions as regards to payment of wages to workmen or others at all. Apart from that, there are specific statutes governing the situation, namely the Payment of Wages Act, Industrial Disputes Act. Let us first see the word used. The obligation is upon the employers, be it in the industry, shops, and commercial establishments. Now, the employers in an industry, they are there. The industry is regulated by Payment of Wages Act and Industrial Disputes Act, whereas shops and commercial establishments will be regulated by Shops and Establishment Act, like we have Delhi Shops and Establishment Act and various other statutes in different states. Now, if we look at the beneficiaries of this, the beneficiaries are workers. Now, what does the term worker mean? Whether a worker is only a workman as defined under the Industrial Dispute Act, or it also includes a person who may be employed in an industry, who may be working in a shop, who may be working in an establishment, who may be working in an office, but may not fall in the definition of a workman. Like the person who have some supervisory role and then he is not a workman. So there is no classification, there is no justification as to why and which class of workers, because those who are in managerial capacity, they are also workers, though may not be workmen. And those who are workmen, they are essentially the workers. So this order does not make any difference between these two as to whether it will be applicable only to the workmen and not the other workers, because worker is a generic term and it has not been defined anywhere as to who is the worker. What is defined under the statute is a workman, not a worker. So to say that employer shall be liable to pay to every worker, to my mind, would include even those workers who may not fall in the definition of a workman under the Industrial Dispute Act. Now, let us first take a worker who will be covered under Shop and Establishment Act. The Shop and Establishment Act does not provide anywhere that for a period or for a duration when a worker is not working, he will be entitled to payment of wages. The only provision, as I have seen in Delhi Shops and Establishment Act, is with regard to a close day. Section 16 and 17 of the uh, Delhi Shops and Establishment Act provides, Section 16 provides which are the closed day, and a closed day is also defined as a weekly day, which is the day off declared by the government for the shop and establishment, as also the days which are national holidays or such other days which the government by notification may declare as the closed days. Now, all our viewers will keep this in mind that neither the central government nor any of the state government in India has issued any gazette notification during this lockdown period as the closed days. So, it is not a closed day under section 16 to qualify payment of wages under section 18. Now, section 18 says that, of course, the employer of a shop and establishment will be liable to pay wages for the closed day. Now, this not being declared as a closed day, this not being qualified to be declared as a closed day, but being a general lockdown, section 18 to my mind will be inapplicable. And there is the employers of shops and establishments cannot be made liable to pay wages for the lockdown period to their workers, because it is not, firstly, it is not that the employers have closed the shop. Secondly, it is not that they have refused to take work from the workers. It is a situation where neither the employer can ask the worker to come to the shop and establishment, nor the worker can come and say that yes, I am available to work. It is the general direction issued by the central government putting both in a lockdown. So it cannot be, one may say that yes, under the Epidemic Diseases Act, the state has power to determine as to who will defray the cost, who will bear the expense. But fortunately, firstly, it is not an order issued by any state, and the central government under section 2A of the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 has no such power. Secondly, the section 210(2)L does not deal with this issue at all. It is merely, to my mind, once again, is an obligation, social obligation of the state to mitigate the hardship suffered by its weaker classes, namely the workers, who are solely dependent on the wages which they earn month to month, day to day. and that is the wage which is required, which is essential for their survival and for exercise of their fundamental right under Article 21. But the question once again would be, can this social obligation of the state be put on the shoulders of the individual citizen? No. And I'll tell my viewers as to why I say that no. Now, coming back to the other part of this very direction, namely the industries. We all know that there is a judicially recognized principle of no work, no pay, and a worker, or I would use the specific term, a workman under the Industrial Disputes Act is entitled to be paid wages for the work done. There are restrictions upon the employer that they cannot refuse to take work. They will not declare lockdown, which is termed as lockout in the Industrial Dispute Act, or they will not lay off the work. But here, when there is a lockdown issued by the state, then the workers are essentially laid off. If you see Section 2KKK of the Industrial Dispute Act, which defines layoff. Section 2KKK includes a situation where the employer is unable to take work either due to a breakdown, due to non-availability of material, due to non-availability of energy, due to availability of excess stock, other reasons. Now, this is the other reason, the order issued by the state, because of which the employer, I may say, let us assume this, that the employer has to tell the workman that, look here, in spite of you being available, I cannot give you work, I cannot take work from you. But I am not retrenching you, I am not terminating you, dismissing you from service. So it is not a case of retrenchment of the workman. I want to continue with my workman, but I have to essentially lay them off because of the lockdown order issued by the state. Now, the Industrial Disputes Act, which is a code in itself, which it has categorized industry three essential categories. One, the industries which employ up to 50 workers, less than 50 workers. Second, the industries which employ 50 to 99 workers, that is less than 100 workers. And industries which employ 100 or more. Now, Industrial Disputes Act provide that in case of a layoff, which is a legally valid layoff, and I would say the present is a legally valid layoff since it is issued under the state, under the orders of the state. Section 25C of the Industrial Disputes Act provides that the workmen at best would be entitled to half of the wages for a total period of 40 days. What I was telling you is that Section 25C and 25M deals with those kind of industries which have employed workers, minimum workers of 50 up to n number. And for them, Section 25C provides that they will be entitled to 50% of the wages for a maximum of 45 days during the layoff period. But incidentally, the Industrial Disputes Act does not create any such obligation on an employer employing less than 50 workers, ostensibly because the industry in such categories are small and medium sector industries, which, if the layoff is held to be valid, legally valid and binding, then it is the legislative thinking that such industries will not be able to take off the economic impact if such a provision is made, such a provision for payment of wages is made during the period of layoff. Now, if we come back to the direction issued by the central government, the central government has issued this direction completely ignorant of the fact that the industry, the number of workmen which are employed by an industry. Secondly, the extent to which the law provides the payment of compensation during the layoff period can be made. And thirdly, as to whether the worker is a workman or not. So this, in the teeth of Industrial Disputes Act and the provisions contained therein, this direction, to my mind, is without any legal backing and is not an exercisable direction by a worker in a court of law. Now, coming back to the issue as to whether the state has the obligation to mitigate the hardship of its citizen, namely the workers, the weaker classes, those who do have limited means or have no means at all. Yes, Article 21 enjoins upon the state to ensure right to life, not only the mere animal existence of a citizen, of a person, but a meaningful right to life. So a situation wherein the state has put its citizen in a lockdown where the citizen cannot make effort on his own to earn his livelihood, the state under Article 21 has an obligation to make provision for its citizen or for the people to sustain themselves, to fulfill their right to life under Article 21. Now the question is, can the state put its obligation, its social welfare obligation upon individuals? And the answer to my mind is a big no. I, as a citizen of India, do not have any obligation to carry out any of the responsibility, social welfare responsibility of the state. I may enter into some kind of a charity, some days for that, that is another aspect, but there is no legal obligation upon a citizen or upon any person to bear the burden of social welfare obligation of the state. And to my mind, one of the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is most relevant on the issue, is Raju Jethmalani versus the state of Maharashtra, a 2005 Supreme Court judgment, wherein the state had created a park on a private land, and the state has taken a plea that look here, in our development scheme we have provided for a park, and so since we have provided for a park, so we have created a park and it is the social obligation, and he will have to use his private land as a park for common public good. The Supreme Court, while dealing with this issue, Supreme Court specifically said that no, the social welfare obligation of the state cannot be put on the shoulders of individuals, and individuals do not have any obligation to bear the burden of the social welfare obligation of the state. And the Supreme Court therefore said that yes, if the state so intends, a state may acquire the land of the individual, but without doing that, the individual, the right of the individual to its property, whether movable or immovable, in this case it is movable, is supreme, and the state cannot put any fetters to it. So here the state has said that you will make payment without there being any statutory obligation upon the employer. So this direction of the state is without any authorization of law. Now the only other methodology by which the state can do is by imposition of tax. A state may say that you may or may not get any benefit, but yes, I have the power to impose tax, and I have imposed this tax that during lockdown period you will pay wages. So this is the tax imposed on all employers. Now, Article 265 empowers the state to impose tax, but the Constitution specifically provides that the liability to pay tax cannot be imposed upon anyone except by way of a money bill. And there is a specific procedure whereby a statute or a statutory order will have to be issued imposing a tax obligation, if we assume this to be a tax obligation. By a mere executive order, no such obligation can be created. In this case, no such statute, as I have just now told you, has been enacted either by the parliament or by any of the state legislature. Therefore, this executive order is incompetent to impose this obligation upon individuals to make payment beyond what is prescribed under the law which governs the industry. So, no order can be made with regard to shops of establishment, and no such order can be made with regard to industry. So to my mind, this order of 29th March 2020, it is already under challenge before Honorable Supreme Court of India. This is without any authority of law. Now, interestingly, it seems that the central government has also realized that what they have ordered perhaps lacks statutory backing. And the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which is the concerned ministry dealing with the industries, has issued a circular dated 10th April 2020, wherein a question was put to the ministry as to whether the obligation to pay wages or the wages paid to the workers for the lockdown period can be set off or charged from the CSR fund which the industry has or which the industry is entitled to create, that is the social obligation, corporate social responsibility fund. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs in its circular has clearly said that no corporate social responsibility fund cannot be defrayed, cannot be used for payment of wages. But interestingly, at the same time, it has been specifically stated that the order dated 29th of March providing for payment of wages is only advisory, and it is only the moral obligation of the industry or the employers to make payment of wages and not a legal obligation. So if we see the nature of orders issued by the government from time to time, beginning from 20th of March till this 10th April 2020, it starts with an advisory and ends with an advisory. So in the beginning also they say that it is only an advisory, and in the end also they say that it is only an advisory and a moral obligation. So if it is only a moral obligation and not a legal obligation, then all of us know that a moral obligation is perhaps not exercisable as a right in a court of law. Therefore, it only remains my moral obligation if I choose to hear my conscience, hear my inner voice that yes, I should take care of my workers, and my financial capability or the financial capability of an employer permits, he may or may not make payment of wages beyond what is prescribed in law, but no such order can be fastened upon any such categories of lawyers. So, viewers, thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity to share my views. I must thank law curators and Mr. S.P. Jain, advocate, and Mr. Abhishek Jain specifically, who have given me this opportunity and who have made me to utilize my free time during this lockdown and do some academic work and address all of you. I hope that some of the issues which we have discussed, the points which we have discussed, the legal position which I have told to you will be of use to you. And I once again thank law curators, Mr. S.P. Jain and Mr. Abhishek Jain. Over to Abhishek Jain.
Sir, we would firstly like to know that had it been declared as a closed day, so then the workmen would have been entitled to their wages.
Yes, under the Shops and Establishment Act, the provision is made under section 18 for payment of wages because a closed day is treated as the day for the worker as the day of duty. He will be deemed to be on duty and therefore would be entitled to payment of wages. But that remains another matter whether such a long duration of time, such a long duration of days, namely more than 30 days as it has been now, can be declared a closed day under section 16 of the Shops and Establishment Act.
Okay, so the next question would be, if tenant does not have enough sources to pay the rent, to what extent will this advisory help him in the court, or what are his other resorts that he can exercise to avoid the payment of rent?
See, it is not that the tenant can avoid payment of rent. The tenant can defer payment of rent only to the extent the law permits, namely, when a notice is issued and the law permits the tenant time under the time period prescribed time period for payment of rent to the landlord so as not to create a default in payment of rent, the tenant will have to make payment of the rent, but otherwise there is no such provision where a tenant can say that since I do not have the capability to make payment, so I will not make payment and because of my financial constraint I am unable to pay, so I am not liable to pay. There is no such provision in law.
So another question asked by one of the audience member was that if during this lockdown, due to the paucity of funds, a workman is retrenched from his job, so will it be a valid ground?
Retrenchment is an altogether different situation than a layoff. In this case, we have not dealt with a retrenchment situation because retrenchment is something which will be dealt with under the Industrial Disputes Act and other acts. And the workman, of course, will be entitled to say that the retrenchment, firstly, is illegal. And secondly, if it is not illegal, then I am entitled to retrenchment compensation. Here it is a case of layoff where the employers are saying that we are not retrenching our workers, but we have laid them off because our establishment is closed, our industry is closed, and we cannot give work to the workmen during this period of closure.
Okay, so the another question is that you mentioned that the state cannot discharge its obligation by imposing the obligation of an to an individual citizen.
Yes.
So, do you want to suggest that the government could have made the payment of rent and the wages from its own pocket rather than it should direct the landlords and the industry owners, etc.?
See, it is not, I am nobody to suggest to the government that you make payment of wages or you make payment of rentals. But yes, of course, if the government wants to bring some relief to the class of its citizen about whom the government feels that they are in need of or they need help or an helping hand from the government, then government will have to come out of with on its own and government will have to make provision for relief and rehabilitation measures for such workers, for such tenants, etc.
Okay, the last question for the day would be, if a workman after the lockdown is lifted refuses to rejoin the work and the employer continued the payment of wages in pursuance of this advisory or direction, so what will be the remedy available to the employer in that case? Can he take the compensation from the workman, or what other remedies could he exercise?
Now, this direction, as it stands, it is not dependent upon the workmen continuing in service post lockdown period. It is only applicable during the lockdown period, and it essentially says that the during the lockdown period, the workmen shall be deemed to be in service and will continue in service. Though the initial direction, as I mentioned, initial direction of March 20th and the last clarification, that is on April 10th, they put this particular direction also as an advisory only. But yes, the direction says that the workmen will be deemed to be in service. So if a workman refuses to work thereafter, then the law as applicable on that day with regard to the workman on his refusal to work thereafter will apply, and the employer will not be entitled, if he makes payment of wages during this period, will not be entitled to make any recovery, because this payment is not being made subject to a condition that the workman will continue after the lockdown period.
Okay, thank you for all the answers, sir, and today's session. I hope it was very informative and enlightening for all the viewers. I once again thank you, sir, for taking time out and for this wonderful gesture of sharing your priceless knowledge with us.
Thank you
Thanks a
so
lot,
very
sir.
much. Thank you so very much, Law Curator Abhishek, Mr. Jain, and all my viewers. Thank you. Thank you very much.